Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm sitting down to catch up on some June ATC swaps, which I'm a little bit behind on. I've done the technique, but I've still got to do the voiceover and upload to my YouTube channel, so thank you so much for being patient with me. This month, my technique was a wax resist. So I started off with this wax roll from my kitchen, and basically I thought that I would pull out my embossing folders, which I really have a lot of and would love to use more of, so I thought that this was a good technique to utilize them. So I picked out a few of my favorite ones and ran them through my Sizzix, and these are the few patterns that I have here. I did think that I was going to start off with ATC size, but I did want to utilize that entire 4x6 embossing card, so I switched over to a larger white paper, and this is Nina Solar, I think 80 GSM. And so I am just putting it in between two copier paper or lined papers and ironing. My iron is pretty warm, and I only just did maybe 10 seconds, and it did a beautiful wax transfer. And then I went ahead and inked it up. This one is Victorian Velvet, and that's the rose pattern by Kaisercraft. This is my next one here. This is the Hearts one. This is the Korikumi embossing folder, and here I am using, I believe, Abandoned Coral. My inking is a little bit blotchy. I really don't mind. This is just a quick background, and basically whenever I use my tissue paper, it just removes some of the excess ink, like the wax resists it, so I really don't mind that it's a bit blotchy. The next one I'm using is a hexagon die, and with that one I'm using fossilized amber. And then the last one here, I'm using a clock embossing folder, and I am using tumbled glass to ink it up. And here are all my designs. I really love the wax resist technique. I think it's really great, very fun, and yeah, good way to use your embossing folders. So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to cut these down, and I'm going to start decorating my ATCs. So for the yellow hexagon wax resist background, I decided to grab this bee stamp, which I got from one of those magazines that come with a whole stamp set. I just stamped it onto some stamping paper, cut out my bee, and then cut down my background to 2 3/8 by 3 3/8. And I'm also grabbing this Sizzix Alteration hexagon die. I love these. I bought this one, and I bought the trellis die as well. And they really make such great elements to go onto cards and ATCs. So I'm making it so that it's a hive where this queen bee is living. I'm also reaching for some hessian here. I kind of have a formula that I go with for ATCs. I start off with a background, and then I add a little bit of texture, and the texture for this one will be the hessian. I then choose the hero focal image, as well as a supporting die cut, just to add more element and interest to the ATC. I'm going ahead here and using the hexagons around the queen bee, and everything's going to get stuck down here with PVA glue. And that queen bee is popped up on 3D foam tape so that she stands out a little bit more. The other thing that I add sometimes is ribbon. Ribbon is a beautiful texture to add, and it just adds more detail to whatever your artwork is. I'm stamping here with vintage sepia. I realized that I should have done this before I put the queen bee down, but I actually did stamp on top of her, and it just adds more texture. I'm using the tiny little stamps to stamp little bees inside each of those little hexagons, and I love how that turned out because it looks like there's bees in every single one. So I love how that turns out. And I added that sentiment that says, make good referring to Make Good Honey. So she's just patrolling the hive there, asking each of those worker bees to make good honey for her. And I finish off with a little bit of extra hessian on top. This is the second one that I did with the rest of the background. I love this one, a little bit different. And it says, Queen Bee seeks experienced workmen. That tickles my fancy so much. So those are the two ATCs that I did with the yellow background. The next one is the background that I did with the Victorian velvet. And I start off first with a little bit of doily, so that represents my texture. For one, I added a little bit of tulle. For the other, I added a little bit of crepe paper, and then I'm going to add ribbon on top as well. Just the more you layer, the nicer it looks. I think that looks really cute and really detailed. I go for this high tea die cut pack, which was one of the Kaisercraft 2017 releases. And I'm just playing around with elements, and I do end up going for teacups because there's been a huge hit on coffee in June, hint, hint, for the anti-Vera craft girls. And so I'm heroing tea for this ATC. So for the left little ATC, I add 2 hearts and a sentiment that says take it to heart because tea is my #1 choice. And for the second one, I made it look like the teacup is in between 2 leaf patterns and the teacup is propped up with foam tape. I love how that looks. And my sentiment for this one is there is no real substitute. Sorry, girls. I love my English breakfast teas. And a little bit of doily because doily always looks good. And I added a little bit of doily to the left of that heart there because I felt like there was a little bit of doily left over, and I think it looks good there behind that left heart. Always remember to back up your ATCs with black cardstock. The black cardstock is the 2.5 by 3.5, which is the size of ATCs, and I always just take 1/8 of an inch off for the white paper. My next lot of ATCs are using the tumbled glass background. Here is that trellis frameworks die. I am also reaching for the Golden Grove die cut pack from Kaisercraft. I bought this maybe May collection, maybe May, maybe June, I can't remember now. And I'm just using simple die cuts for this ATC and layering on some elements. Here comes a little bit of the crepe paper, and I love how when you add PVA glue, you can just ruffle up that crepe paper and it creates such a lovely look and such a lovely texture. It's so easy. And I love that sentiment. Home is wherever you are. So that butterfly is rushing off to her home keys. And I add a little bit of metallic cord there, and this ATC comes together so nicely. And let me show you what I did with the second background. I added the crepe paper again, and then added my elements. I did want to use a few of those tickets, but they were covering up the background, and the technique would have been lost, which is what the ATC is all about. Show us your background. So I had to just go with that butterfly. I have this beautiful ribbon set from Corey Kumi from last year's design team. I'm trying to hoard as much as I can, but I'm slowly getting through it. Colored vines, they're beautiful. And I went with the sentiment that says, I had a lovely time. I love these punny sentiments. They really tickle me, and so this is one of my favorite ATCs. And that's what they look like. They're so simple to make, yet so effective. Same technique, same elements, but 2 totally different looking cards. The next one is, I think, Abandoned Coral. I'll put the details on my blog. Now, this one ended up being a little bit shorter than the others because I wanted it to be directional because the hearts went up and down vertically, and so I wanted it to be placed correctly. So I had to cut the ATCs down a little bit smaller so they were only 2 inches. And what I did was I extended it out to 2 3/8 inches by adding that red ribbon on the side there. And I think it's a great technique that I usually use when I'm just a little bit short. I go ahead using the trellis die again, a little bit of hessian on the back, and this time instead of using die cuts or stamping, I'm using stickers. These are dimensional stickers. I love these guys, and yeah, I think they create an ATC really nicely. And for my sentiment, I put home in the garden. Here is what the second one looked like. I ended up piling on the metallic cord underneath our love story, and then just added some little bit more trellis and the butterfly and the hessian. And that one says, "Our love story, one of the best." Here is my collection of wax resist ATCs for the month of June. I've sent these off now to their partners, and I'm just so glad that you could join me in the process of making them. Have you ever considered making ATCs? Why don't you go ahead and find a partner who you can swap with? It's just so much fun making them, and it's also so much fun seeing how your partner interprets making them. I hope you have a good day today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in my next video.